Life is a lie, not by accident, but by design. They knew the truth, and they kept it from you. From your very first breath, you were dropped into a maze of illusions, not accidentally, but on purpose. A system built to make you believe in walls that don't exist, that you're small, that death is the end, that time only moves in one direction, and that life is just random chaos. But behind all the noise, behind the distractions, and the layers of carefully crafted lies, there's a deeper current, an ancient truth. It's never disappeared. It's just been hidden in plain sight. Thoth, that ancient force honored in Egyptian, Greek, and Hermetic circles, didn't hand down fairy tales. He left a system, a map, a raw, powerful framework for bending reality that's been buried on purpose, under centuries of empires, academic noise, and watered-down spiritual fluff. This isn't motivational wallpaper or New Age copy-paste. These teachings, they're real, they're risky. They don't just shift your mindset. They crack you open and rebuild you from the inside out. And once you've glimpsed them, there's no going back. You were never supposed to find this out. That's exactly why no one ever told you. These teachings didn't just go missing over time. They were buried, deliberately, not by accident, but by systems afraid of what they unlock. For millennia, wisdom that could wake you up to who you really are has been carefully hidden, mocked, or watered down until it lost its spark. This wasn't some historical oops. It was a calculated move to keep humanity shackled to what's visible, trackable, and easy to control. Because if people truly grasped the depth of what Thoth revealed, they wouldn't just think differently. They'd reshape the entire game. This kind of knowledge didn't just rattle thrones. It shook the foundation of control itself. Not control through politics, but through perception. What props up empires? What cements religions? What keeps people from asking the dangerous questions? Because once you grasp that consciousness creates reality, that thought can bend time, that your mind can literally reshape the physical world, the whole idea of external authority starts to collapse. No government, no belief system, no hierarchy can survive in a world where every soul remembers they're the blueprint maker, not the pawn. That's why Thoth didn't just write it out plainly. He coded it, in symbols, in sacred geometry, in riddles wrapped in metaphor. It had to survive, but not so obviously that it could be erased. His teachings weren't simply lost, they were twisted, inverted. The very institutions that burned the mystics at the stake were studying their secrets in candle-lit chambers. Secret societies, royal lineages, high priests. They didn't ignore Hermetic truths. They built their rituals on them. While the world was told it was all nonsense or sin, they were using the sacred as a tool for domination, disguising wisdom as taboo to keep the real power hidden in plain sight. Over the centuries, Thoth's teachings were diluted, dressed up in mysticism, or tossed aside as fantasy. The emerald tablets, brushed off as myth, the law of mentalism, treated like poetic fluff, and the sacred geometry that maps consciousness itself, reduced to obscure diagrams buried in textbooks, or tagged as woo by the mainstream. And that's exactly how the system planned it. Because now, when you look up Thoth, what do you get? Folklore, pop culture, and spiritual fluff. All smoke, no fire. But if you dig beneath the static, past the fluff and distractions, something incredible starts to emerge. Not a belief system, but a technology of consciousness. A framework that doesn't ask for faith. It dares you to experiment. Thoth wasn't preaching dogma. He was laying down quantum mechanics, cloaked in ancient language. When he spoke of the all, he wasn't pointing to a deity. He was describing a living field of frequency. And the planes, not poetry. He was mapping energetic layers of existence. These weren't myths, they were manuals. But here's what most people overlook. This system was never meant to stay hidden forever. It was built for a future moment, a point when humanity would finally be ready to remember. That moment, it's now. Why else would you be here, listening, feeling like something deep inside you already knows this, even if no one ever taught it to you? The first layer of truth doesn't start with the brain. It starts with the mind. Thoth's core teaching, all is mind, wasn't poetic fluff. It was literal. Reality is mental. Everything you touch, feel, see, and think unfolds inside a conscious field. And your perception? It's the lens shaping it all. You were trained to believe you live in a dead, physical universe, that your thoughts are just background noise locked in your head. But Thoth said the opposite. Thought builds your reality. Frequency lays the structure. Emotion gives it power. And belief unlocks the whole thing. This is exactly why the system works over time to keep you distracted. Everything around you, school, media, religion, even the way we use language, is engineered to sever your connection to the truth. You shape your reality. They've trained you to trust only what's real, what's scientific, what's logical, but only through the lens they control. Meanwhile, the very science they swear by is finally catching up to what Thoth taught eons ago. Quantum physics is now confirming what ancient mystics already lived. Observation changes the outcome. Intention moves matter. Time isn't a straight line, and energy responds to conscious awareness. Thoth wasn't dealing in superstition. His teachings were soul-level technologies, way ahead of their time. And that's exactly why they shake the foundations of modern thinking. Because they reveal one undeniable truth. You're not here to serve the system. You are the system. And the moment you remember how to tap into that inner architecture, the whole game flips. The universe isn't built from matter, it's built from mind. That's not just poetic talk, that's physics. And it's exactly what Thoth was saying, long before the labs and equations caught up. He wasn't interested in storytelling about gods with mood swings or parables to keep people in line. He gave straight-up instructions, real esoteric tech, disguised as spiritual language, made for those ready to see past the surface. This wasn't philosophy. It was a blueprint for how reality actually functions. Thought is the substance behind all substance. The world around you isn't just unfolding at random. It's being filtered, shaped, and echoed back to you through your state of awareness. Once you grasp that, you stop playing the role of victim and start stepping into your role as an active creator of your own experience. Here's where things get uncomfortable for some, because this flips the script. If your thoughts, your frequency, and your emotional state are shaping your reality, then the chaos in your life, it's not random, it's reactive. It's not always your fault, but it's always a mirror. Thoth called it alignment. He taught that when your mind, your feelings, and your actions move in sync with the natural laws of the universe, reality doesn't fight you, it flows with you. And no, this isn't manifestation in the watered-down, wishful thinking sense. This is mechanics. Consciousness causes. Everything else is the ripple. Thoth also made it clear, vibration is the blueprint of all form. What you think of as solid objects, They're just slowed down frequencies, energy frozen into shapes your senses can process. You're not seeing the field, you're seeing the snapshot. Beneath every person, every object, every emotion, there's a vibrational code. Shift the code, the form follows. That's why rituals, sound, symbols, even focused intention, aren't superstition. They're tools, real tools, designed for real transformation. The ancients weren't naive. They spoke in the language of symbol, because truth this powerful isn't something you just hand out casually. It has to be unlocked. Modern science calls it quantum field theory. Thoth called it the great mental plane. Same concept. The field responds to consciousness. And once you start working with that truth, not just understanding it but embodying it, everything starts to shift. First inside, then out. Reality stops feeling fixed. Synchronicities multiply, old patterns dissolve, and the magic you once dismissed or feared, you realize it's not fantasy, it's LAW in motion. You don't need to believe, you need to align. Thoth's teachings weren't just about manifesting your reality, they were about doing it with integrity. No ego games, no manipulation, no spiritual shortcuts that sabotage your growth. Because just like nature, consciousness follows laws, polarity, rhythm, correspondence, cause and effect. These aren't abstract ideas. They're the core operating systems of reality. When you're out of sync with them, life feels chaotic, unstable, hard to navigate. But when you move in harmony with these laws, the outer world shifts. It becomes a mirror that works with you, not against you. And that's why most people never tap into their true power. They try to shift the outer world without ever mastering the inner one. They throw around rituals, spells, affirmations, vision boards, without understanding the principles that make them work. Thoth made it clear, power without wisdom leads to collapse. That's why the deepest knowledge was always guarded by initiation, not to keep it secret, but to make sure it was used responsibly. You can absolutely change reality by changing your mind. But once you realize that, your thoughts aren't just passing noise anymore. They become sacred tools. You've been conditioned to believe spirituality and science are opposites, that consciousness is just some glitch in your brain chemistry. But Thoth taught something far more profound, and the science is finally catching up. Thoth's teachings made one thing clear: consciousness comes first. The physical doesn't create the mental gives rise to the physical. That flips the entire materialist worldview on its head. It also means your growth isn't limited by what you see, but by how you think. Every limitation you accept gets coded into your field. Every belief you challenge breaks another thread in the illusion. These teachings were never about worshipping distant gods or escaping this world. They were about stepping into your role within it, not as some superior being, but as a co-creator, a conscious spark within the intelligence that runs through everything. You are a drop of the all, with the ability to remember what you are. That's the truth they worked so hard to bury. That's what the constant noise of modern life is meant to drown out. But now, the signal's breaking through, and this time, you're listening. You were told that time moves in one direction: past, present, future. You're born, you age, you die. Straight line. No rewinds, no detours. That was the first lie. Thoth's teachings didn't just disagree with that idea, they shattered it. Time, he said, isn't linear, it's spiral. It bends, loops, expands, collapses, all depending on your level of awareness. The past hasn't vanished, The future isn't somewhere out there. They're both happening now. And no, this isn't poetic symbolism. It's literal instruction. You're not moving through time. Time is moving through you. This is one of the boldest truths in the Emerald Tablets, and one of the most buried. Because if time isn't fixed, then neither is your fate. If you can tap into other points in time through consciousness, then you're no longer trapped in the system's pre-written story for your life. You're not a passive passenger. It's you who navigates. Thoth mapped all of this using symbols, numbers, and geometry. The spiral, the infinity loop, the Ouroboros. These weren't just mystical decorations, they were codes. Keys to how energy and awareness flow across dimensions. When the teachings said, man is a flame bound to a mountain, they were pointing to a deeper truth. Consciousness trapped in matter, stuck in a timeline until it remembers it can move. And when it does remember, everything shifts. The stories you thought defined you start to unravel. Patterns emerge. You begin to notice echoes, choices from the past rippling into the now. Déjà vu, strange dreams, sudden waves of emotion or intuition. They're not random glitches. They're bleed-throughs, moments where the spiral folds in on itself and the illusion of linear time cracks. Most people dismiss them, but the initiated, they use them. Thoth's teachings reveal that those who awaken to the spiral nature of time can navigate it, not with machines, but through frequency. Because memory isn't just stored in your brain, it lives in the field. And the future? It's not a destination, it's something you generate. When you align your thoughts, emotions, and energy with a specific version of the future, you begin to collapse probabilities. The field reacts, synchronicities speed up, and your timeline shifts. This isn't some fantasy, it's a forgotten science. Indigenous wisdom, ancient mystics, and even quantum physicists have brushed against this truth, but Thoth was one of the first to break it down into a system. He explained how certain meditative states and rituals can dissolve the illusion of time completely, giving you access to insight, healing, and transformation from other points along the spiral. What you call a past life. It's not something that happened once and faded. It's unfolding right now, in parallel, on another level of the same spiral, and that means you're not chained to it. The trauma, conditioning, or limitation you think defines you. It's not fixed. It can be rewritten. If you can access the point, you can change the pattern. Thoth called this the mastery of the cycles. Those who see the spiral aren't stuck on the wheel. Karma, fate, repetition. They only bind those who move blindly through time. But when you remember how time actually flows, you shift perspective. You stop reacting and start responding. Stop waiting and start creating. Look around. There's a reason the system keeps you locked in clock time. Alarms, 9-to-5 routines, deadlines, calendars. These aren't about productivity, they're about programming. Your body, your emotions, even your thoughts have been trained to move in sync with artificial rhythms. And eventually, you mistake that rhythm for your own. But deep down, something in you still remembers the real beat. The spiral pulse, the frequency of the greater field. That's why moments of AW, flow, love, and deep creativity feel timeless. Because they are. Time isn't your enemy, it's your medium. Thoth's teachings urge you to stop treating time like a prison and start seeing it as a canvas. You're not late, you're not early. You're exactly where your frequency placed you. And the beautiful part, that frequency can change. Shift it, and everything around you begins to move. You weren't born to drift through the spiral. You're here to navigate it with precision, with presence, with power. And the instant you do, Time starts paying attention. Death has been weaponized, not with swords or bombs, but through psychology. From the moment you could grasp the concept, you were conditioned to fear it, to see it as the end, the blackout, the point of no return. And that wasn't a coincidence, because when you fear death, you become controllable. You obey, you conform, you cling to anything that promises safety, even if TD death isn't the end. It's a doorway, a frequency shift, not a disappearance. Buhat's safety is an illusion. But Thoth didn't teach fear. He taught remembrance. He set a transformation. He called it the Great Portal, a passage from one plane to the next. In his texts, he laid out multiple layers of reality, each more refined, more subtle, more conscious than the one before. The physical body is just the outer layer, a temporary suit that lets consciousness experience density. When it breaks down, awareness doesn't end. It shifts. It moves into the next frequency band, what Thoth called the astral and etheric planes. These aren't fantasy realms or dreamlike illusions. They're just as real as this one, but they operate on different wavelengths, with different laws and levels of density. You can't see them because your senses are tuned to the physical, but your soul, it remembers. And that's exactly what the system wants you to forget. Because if you knew your consciousness goes on, if you truly understood that your essence is indestructible, you'd be a lot harder to control. You wouldn't waste your life fearing the unknown or trading your time for false security. You'd start asking deeper questions. You'd start living on purpose instead of living by permission. That's why death is cloaked in taboo and silence. Because if you truly saw it for what it is, you'd stop living small. Thoth didn't sugarcoat death, and he didn't fear it either. He honored it as a sacred crossing point, a threshold you can pass through with clarity or confusion, awareness or sleep. Most people, he said, stumble through it like dreamers, dragged by fear, weighed down by regrets, still clinging to the unresolved. But those who wake up in life, they can wake up in death too. With preparation, with presence, with alignment, the soul can carry memory and intention beyond the veil. That's not faith, it's navigation. That's why so many of Thoth's teachings centered around energetic mastery. Because the more you align with universal law while you're alive, the smoother the transition becomes. Death doesn't wipe your frequency clean, it amplifies it. If your life was rooted in fear, guilt, and attachment, those vibrations echo into what comes next. But if you lived with presence, clarity, and conscious intent, those qualities carry forward, not as reward or punishment, but as resonance. Thoth also warned of getting stuck in the in-between, those liminal zones where souls linger, unaware they've even crossed over, still chasing closure, still grasping at the material. He called these the shadow realms, not hell, but distortion, confusion born from an unready mind. That's why initiation mattered, not to join some secret club, but to become sovereign across dimensions, to know yourself not just in the mirror, but in the mirrorless realm where form dissolves. Modern science cloaks these truths with sanitized labels: near-death experiences, neural activity, hypnagogic states. But those who've stood on the edge and returned often say the same thing. Consciousness doesn't die. There's motion, there's light, there's something. And that something isn't random, it's aware. It moves in response to your state, your presence, your will. Thoth understood this, and he left behind maps, not blueprints on parchment, but symbolic keys, rituals, invocations, visualizations, all designed to help the soul navigate the space beyond form. One of his deepest teachings was simple but revolutionary. Don't wait until death to remember who you are. If you can master awareness while you're here, you take that mastery with you. Death doesn't have to be a shock. It can be a conscious crossing, a moment of clarity instead of confusion. Because the truth that's been hidden your whole life is this: you are not the body. You are the awareness behind it. And awareness aligned with truth doesn't disappear. It evolves. The fear of death is one of humanity's oldest shackles, but once it breaks, something shifts. You stop moving through life like it's something to protect and start living like it's something to express. You're no longer playing it safe. You're playing it true. You begin to see your existence not as a countdown, but as a spiral of evolution, a dance of remembering. Thoth didn't just speak about death so you'd understand it. He urged you to train for it, not from fear, but from honor. Because how you cross over depends on how you show up here. And when you live with presence and alignment, a truth reveals itself, one that threatens every system built on fear. Death is not the end of your story. It's where your real journey begins. You've been conditioned to chase power in the outer world. Status, achievement, control, validation, all dressed up as success. But Thoth flipped that script entirely. To him, power wasn't something to pursue. It was something to ignite, not through domination, but through deep inner mastery. And not the surface-level kind where you tweak your mindset or build better habits. He was pointing to something far more profound. Thoth taught that within you lies a multi-layered system of awareness, an energetic architecture woven with centers of power, currents of thought, and portals to realms most people never notice. Not because they can't, but because they've been trained not to look. This is the core of inner alchemy. Thoth wasn't handing out moral lessons. He was delivering mechanics. He revealed that your body, your emotions, and your thoughts aren't separate. They're part of a single, intelligent system. One that can either run on autopilot, driven by fear and old conditioning, or be consciously directed through will and alignment. Thoth didn't see the human as one fixed identity, but as a layered constellation of forces. The physical form, the energy field, the mental realm, the causal layer, and the higher self, each with its own laws, its own role, and its own doorway into expanded awareness. And the key to unlocking them: responsibility, not in the sense of guilt or shame, but true ownership of your vibration, your thoughts, your actions, your trajectory. Thoth didn't promise salvation. He handed you tools: ritual, breath, geometry, sound, stillness, intention. These weren't spiritual extras. They were instruments for tuning your frequency. Because real self-mastery isn't about control. It's about resonance. Most people aren't broken. They're just out of tune, misaligned. Their emotional bodies are running loops of unhealed trauma. Their minds, cluttered with noise and fear. Their energy, dulled from disconnection. So they move through life like a scrambled signal, always pushing, rarely flowing. But when you start doing the real work, not the grind of trying to be better, but the sacred work of remembering, you start to see how much of who you think you are isn't really yours. Your beliefs, your triggers, your habits, they're inherited, absorbed, replayed. And the moment you start questioning them, you open space for the real you to come through. That's what Thoth called the return to center, the process of peeling back layers, unlearning the noise, and tuning your core frequency to the higher design that's already encoded within you. Thoth taught that true mastery has nothing to do with control. It's about coherence. The more your internal systems align, the more you flow through life. Not because everything suddenly becomes easy, but because you stop fighting reality. You stop bleeding energy to uphold false identities. You stop chasing approval from structures that thrive on your self-doubt. And in that stillness, in that stripped-down clarity, your real power begins to surface. Most people think enlightenment is a finish line, a flash of bliss or sudden knowing. But Thoth framed it as a refinement, a long unfolding across lifetimes. Less lightning bolt, more slow fire. He warned, the ego loves to hijack this process, masking pride as purpose, superiority as wisdom. That's why humility isn't weakness. It's your compass. Without humility, you're not truly seeking. You're just collecting, gathering spiritual terms, covering up wounds you haven't healed. Real mastery doesn't need to prove anything. It's not loud. It's not flashy. It just is. And here's the paradox. The deeper you dive into the self, the more you see that the self isn't what you thought it was. The eye that watches, the eye that chooses, that grows. It's not your personality. It's awareness. The presence behind the persona. The current moving through the character. And when that awareness wakes up within form, you stop asking the world to validate you. You don't need to, because you were born wired into something that lives beyond the senses, beyond approval, beyond limits, and no one can hand it to you. They can only remind you it was yours all along. He didn't show up to comfort. He came to reveal. His truth wasn't always gentle, but it was always freeing. Thoth understood that if you don't master yourself, the world will do it for you. And the systems around you, school, media, religion, culture, they thrive on that disconnection. They reward your distraction, monetize your doubt, worship surface, and bury substance. And if you don't claim your inner space, they'll flood it with fear, noise, idols, and empty promises. But once you step onto the path of true mastery, not performance, not pretending, you become a problem for the system. Not because you're shouting, but because you're centered. Not because you rebel, but because you remember. And that memory, that inner recognition, is the ignition point. It's where life stops being scripted by the outside and starts being steered from within. That's the piece they never wanted you to find out. The power you've been chasing has always been inside you. It never needed permission. It just needed your attention. The reason you've never come across these teachings isn't because they were lost. It's because they were buried, intentionally, systematically, over centuries. The world you live in wasn't designed to awaken your power. It was built to shape you, to mold your perception, to predefine what's real, what's respectable, and what's safe to explore. Anything that threatens that control doesn't disappear by accident. It gets erased, distorted, or diluted until it's harmless. That's exactly what happened with Thoth's teachings. This wasn't history fading over time. This was a strategic deletion. When empires rose, they didn't just seize land, they seized memory. The kind of knowledge that couldn't be weaponized or used to herd the masses was buried behind symbols, locked away in secret circles, or laughed off as myth. Thoth's writings, his codes, his entire system of initiation, they weren't lost, they were tampered with. Too potent to leave untouched, so they were twisted. His name was reduced to a cartoon, his image turned into mythology, and his teachings were broken apart, spread thin across religions, philosophies, and secret societies, never shown as a whole. What you've been given are pieces, whispers, not the original signal. The modern world doesn't fear fantasy. It fears truth, especially the kind of truth that's ancient, raw, and empowering. Because that kind of truth threatens every system built on your confusion. So the institutions respond in unison. Universities label it myth, religions brand it blasphemy, science calls it pseudoscience, and the media slaps it with the conspiracy tag. It's all the same playbook. Mock what can't be owned, turn it into spectacle, and keep you comfortable in a version of reality that feels safe, small, and manageable. But if you really look beyond the noise, the fingerprints of Thoth are everywhere, hidden in plain sight. For those who've learned to see, you'll find them etched into architecture, woven into the symbols on government buildings and ancient monuments. They echo through the cryptic language of secret societies, many born from hermetic wisdom, only to be gutted and turned into tools of exclusion. You'll see them in the symmetry of sacred geometry, in the math of music, in the divine proportions of the human body itself. They even show up in the world's major religious texts, buried under layers of metaphor and parable, hinted at, but never fully named. Because these weren't just stories. They were instructions, blueprints for the human being who remembers what it truly is. Why? Because control depends on forgetting. If you forget that your thoughts shape reality, you won't question why life feels stuck. If you forget that time spirals, you won't notice the same patterns looping. If you forget that death is a doorway, you'll spend your whole life outrunning it, even if it means living a lie. Forgetfulness is the fuel of modern civilization. That's why comfort is sold at every corner. Comfortable beliefs, comfortable distractions, a comfortable history where power was never truly yours. The system doesn't need to censor this knowledge anymore. It already rewired your perception. It made it boring. It made it woo. It buried it under layers of New Age sparkle and academic arrogance. It trained you to laugh off the very truths that could liberate you. That's the brilliance of the system. It didn't need to destroy the truth. It just drowned it in noise. But that fog is starting to lift. Quietly, gradually. People are beginning to remember. People like you, who feel something stir when you hear these words. Something that bypasses logic and lands deep in a place older than memory. That's not random. That's resonance. You've been here before, not necessarily in body, but in awareness, and some part of you never forgot. The emerald tablets were never meant for the masses. They were encoded for those who ask the right questions, who look through the cracks in the story, who feel the hollowness of the world's illusion and whisper, there has to be more than this. And there is more. But you won't find it in a textbook, a trending clip, or some neatly packaged philosophy. You'll find it when you start peeling back the layers of conditioning, when you step out of the story you were given and into the truth you were born to remember. That's exactly why it's been hidden, because a person who remembers can't be controlled. They can't be sold a fake purpose or funneled into belief systems designed to strip them of their sovereignty. Thoth's teachings were never about idolizing him. They were about reclaiming the original code of who you really are. Not a consumer, not a follower, not a background character in a crumbling machine, but a conscious architect of reality itself. And when enough of us remember that, the entire structure starts to crack. You don't need to swear an oath or walk through torchlit halls to begin this path. You don't need crystals, candles, or cryptic mantras. Thoth's initiation doesn't begin with ceremony. It begins in the pause between your thoughts. in that quiet witness behind your eyes that's always watching, always present, but rarely acknowledged. That still space you brush past every day. That's the threshold. And here's the twist. The most potent wisdom isn't sealed in ancient vaults. It's been hiding in the most overlooked terrain of all, your own inner landscape. Not locked away, just ignored. Thoth's teachings weren't about performing outer rituals. They were about tuning the inner instrument. The emerald tablets weren't rules to obey. They were maps for exploring the terrain of your own consciousness. He didn't hand you beliefs to recite. He offered a method for direct experience. That's what real initiation is. Not stuffing your mind with new ideas, but waking up the deeper awareness that's already there. It's not about becoming someone else. It's about peeling off the layers of who you were told to be. And that's where it gets raw. Because true self-initiation means facing everything you've shoved into the background, the loops you distract yourself with, the unresolved weight you carry, the patterns you've accepted as just how I am without ever asking why. Most people imagine awakening as some dramatic lightning strike, but more often it's a slow burn, a steady unraveling of everything false. It creeps in quietly, revealing where you're not actually free, the relationships that leave you depleted, the beliefs that keep you playing small, the routines that numb instead of nourish. And then comes the crossroads. Pretend you didn't see it, and drift back into the illusion, or follow the thread, even if it unravels everything you thought was real. That moment is where true initiation begins. It's not polished. It's not made for social media. It's messy, intimate, and profoundly sacred. Thoth's path is straightforward, but don't mistake that for easy. It calls for a level of presence that can't be faked with guided meditations or feel-good mantras. It's the kind of presence that looks discomfort in the eye and doesn't flinch. He taught that your triggers aren't problems, they're pointers. Every emotional surge is a signal. Your body, your thoughts, your energetic state. These aren't things to escape. They're instruments. They're blueprints. The ancient teachings weren't meant to lift you out of life. They were meant to drop you deeper into it. Fully awake, fully responsible, fully sovereign. And that's the real work. It's not about piling on more knowledge. It's about integration. You already know the truth. You've read it, felt it, maybe even glimpsed it in fleeting moments. But knowing about something isn't the same as embodying it. Thoth's teachings don't care how many quotes you can recite. They ask one thing. Are you living it? When fear rises, do you meet it with steady awareness? Or do you run? When illusion dangles its comfort, can you see through it without grabbing on? And when silence enters, can you stay with it? Without numbing, without scrolling, without needing to fill the space. That's the path. Not performance, presence. These are the initiations that actually matter. The quiet ones no one sees. The moments where you choose truth instead of comfort. Clarity over control. Real growth instead of just looking the part. Thoth understood that the outside world is just a mirror, but the real shift begins behind your eyes. That's why his teachings can feel cryptic. They weren't designed to be cracked by intellect alone. They were meant to be felt, lived, slowly unraveled through experience. That's the beauty of real initiation. It doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds, one layer at a time. Each insight opens the door to the next. Each choice tunes your frequency a little deeper into alignment. And maybe that's why you're here. Not to collect more knowledge, but to remember something timeless. Not to transform into someone new, but to return to who you were before the world got loud. The initiation isn't waiting for you in some distant place. It's already in motion. Every word that stirred something in you, every pause that made you feel, every truth that rang like a tuning fork in your chest. That was the signal, calling you inward, not to keep seeking, but to start embodying what you've always known deep down. None of this is truly new to you. It may feel new, but deep down, it isn't. That stirring in your chest, that quiet resonance echoing behind your thoughts as each idea lands, that's not discovery, it's recognition. You're not learning something foreign. You're remembering something that's always been within you, quietly waiting. Thoth's teachings weren't crafted to impress the mind. They were meant to activate something deeper, to shake awake the part of you the world has spent a lifetime trying to numb, distract, or bury. And now, that part is beginning to rise. The 100 teachings of Thoth aren't a checklist. They're not trivia to memorize or artifacts to admire. They weren't meant to sit on a shelf or boost your spiritual ego. They exist to initiate, to ignite, to reprogram the way you perceive reality. These teachings aren't just concepts, they're keys. Each one is designed to unlock a door within your consciousness. A door that's been sealed not by chance, but by a system that understood exactly what would happen if you ever opened it. Because once those doors begin to open, the version of you they tried to contain no longer fits inside their design. This isn't just another piece of content. It's a crossroads. From here, you have a choice. Keep moving like nothing shifted. Pretend this didn't stir something deep inside you. Or pause, breathe, and admit that everything feels different now. Because once you glimpse what's behind the curtain, you can't unsee it. The old story about life, about power, about purpose, it doesn't fit anymore. The illusion doesn't hold the same weight. The distractions lose their grip. That's the price of awakening. It clears out the noise and leaves you face to face with the real question. What now? That's where the real work begins. Not the show of spirituality, not the curated rituals or recycled quotes that look good but lack depth, but the inner shift, the quiet, often invisible work of integration. It starts the moment you stop outsourcing your truth and begin living it, breath by breath, choice by choice, not perfectly, but authentically. Because at the heart of Thoth's teachings is this simple truth. Knowledge alone isn't power, it's potential. It only becomes power when it's embodied. Information doesn't set you free. Alignment does. You can memorize the laws of the universe and still be asleep if you don't actually live them. Don't wait for permission. You don't need validation. You don't need the right time. You've always had what you need. It's the stillness you keep pushing aside, the gut feeling you keep silencing, the fire you were told to dim because it was too much. That intensity, that edge, that knowing, that's the real you. Not the version you edited to fit in, but the one you tucked away to survive a world that couldn't handle your truth. But what if I told you this is just the beginning? Thoth's emerald tablets aren't the only sacred hidden source of knowledge. There's a book that was buried over 1,200 years ago, deep in the Himalayan mountains. This book reveals a hidden truth so profound, so transformative, that once you understand it, you'll never see your life the same way again. The ancient texts reveal a secret sequence. Your soul navigated before entering this world, a journey deliberately concealed from humanity for thousands of years. Click the video on screen to discover the 7 sacred stages every soul experiences before birth. This forbidden knowledge will instantly illuminate why you're really here, what you're meant to accomplish, and why you've felt that unexplainable pull toward awakening your entire life. I'll see you in the next chapter.